Welcome back, guys, to CFL Central. CFL content for the fans, by the fans, and it is our preview. Wait, no, it's not our preview. Almost had it there. We're actually doing a video that's not a preview of a review because we need to talk about the Edmonton Elks doing the impossible and snapping their terrible, terrible winless streak at home, but winless no further as they finally win at home against the Ottawa Red Blacks just this past week. We've been meaning to make this video. And one thing I gotta say, go back, watch all of the preview videos. I bet against the Elks every single time except for this week. So I knew exactly when they were going to break it. I knew. Insider info. I had it down. But, you know, before we talk about how the Elks are going to go moving forward, I think, Rick, we need to understand how we got here. And how is that?
Like that the winning streak is finally over type thing? Like how we got
the
there
losing
for that?
streak, not the winning streak. There ain't no winning streak.
The losing streak. Is that what you're talking about? Like how we
have to talk about the utter failure before we can talk about success and possible
Oh,
success.
God. So let me go back in time. So I think we're going, what's this, pre-COVID?
Yeah, this is pre-COVID because they were because the last time they had won at home prior to this win was as the Edmonton Eskimos. This is before a lot of sports teams changed their names in favor of something a bit more suitable. And
so
honestly,
we are
I think
dating.
This was the best of the rebrands by far.
You want to you want to hear an interesting fact?
Yeah, let's hear about it.
Their last win before this losing streak ended, they beat the Lions 19-6. Back on October 12th, 2019.
Yep. That's crazy. October 12th, 2019.
And then
was the last time.
To make the matters worse, the week before that, BC had beat Toronto 55-8. Back in 2019.
So this streak could have easily been even longer than it was.
Oh, I mean,
in the sense of BC had a big win the week prior, but I remember when I very first just was getting into football, the Edmonton Elks, the Edmonton Elks, formerly Eskimos, were quite good. Like they not in the sense of that they were absolutely amazing, but I remember they went like a good 6-0 to start a season, and then we got a win against them, and I was like ecstatic, as a stupid football fan. And I'm not saying football fans are stupid. I'm saying I was stupid because I hardly knew anything about the sport, and I was just happy that the team that I was getting into was doing good, which was great. We didn't win anything then, but then the winning started. But that'll be kind of the last time the Elks saw gold in terms of back at Commonwealth. Until, we had a big period off, no season in 2020. Oh my God, imagine if I had the channel before then. That would have been a nightmare for me. Like, oh my God, all of my content is fucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to the Edmonton Elks, it's funny because they had Trevor Harris, and Trevor Harris seemed like the guy. He had one game that was pretty bad, and it seemed like at that point the Elks were just done with him. After one pretty bad game, it was like, there is no second chance. You are being shipped off to Montreal. And I believe they brought in Nick Arbuckle as the replacement at the time. Is that correct? When they shipped off Trevor Harris?
So the funny thing about this is, just before we go back to that,
yep,
you got to remember, okay, so Jason Moss was their head coach from 16 to 19.
Yeah.
So it started with Moss. Milanovic was in 2020, but we don't count that because that was the canceled season.
Because he didn't actually coach.
Yeah. Then they had Jamie, and I'm probably going to butcher this. It was Elizondo in 2021. Losing season.
Yep.
At home. And now Chris Jones.
I see. Yeah, and Chris Jones is, yeah. I'm trying to find here where they trade Trevor Harris, because this was a big deal, because this is when Cornelius started, and Cornelius started with a bit of promise. Like he was good at running the ball. His throwing was kind of a little suspect, and I almost wonder if so. He was a very different running quarterback than a guy like Chris Streveler, who was with the Bombers at the time. But the thing is that one of the things that's important to realize in why Edmonton pushed on Cornelius being the guy for so long is if you look at a guy like Chris Streveler. Chris Streveler was in Winnipeg. He was that backup who would run the ball in short yardage, all that sorts of stuff. However, he was he was more one of those stockier quarterbacks, and he was a running back at one point. And so his running style wasn't really, really quick, really, really agile. Is I'm a tank. I'm going to drive this ball forward, and no one is going to be able to pull me down. And that was his style. Cornelius, on the other hand, was more of he goes outside the pocket, he sees that hole, he runs through it, he gets a lot of yards, gets the slide. So very different from a guy like Chris Streveler. But I guess where I'm getting into the comparisons here is Chris Streveler goes to the NFL, goes to the New York Jets, has that unbelievable preseason game with the New York Jets where it showed how once you taught Chris Streveler how to throw, we're now talking about an NFL level quarterback. And I feel like almost that was kind of the hope with Cornelius is that if we could ever get his throwing game, he would be unstoppable. The problem is that throwing game never developed the way that they wanted. So it was one of those things where they kept pushing for it because they really felt like it would have turned the entire franchise around if they could. But the problem is that they kept holding on to false hope in that sense. And it wasn't till this year that we even got to see Trey Ford go in and really work some magic. And now he seems like the guy that Edmonton's going to be rolling with.
So I found the 2019 roster for the Elks. Or, sorry, this was the Eskimos because I think COVID
because they changed their name after the season. Like, it was in 2019, but it was after the season had concluded, I believe.
So back then they had Jeremiah Briscoe, Trevor Harris, Logan Kilgore, and Troy Williams as their quarterback.
Troy Williams, I forgot about that name.
Oh, and here's the kicker though. Do you want to know what their receiving core was like back in?
Oh, 19? I thought you were about to tell me who the actual kicker was because you said here's the kicker.
Ricky Collins.
Yeah.
Devarius Daniels, who's now on the Argos.
Yep.
Greg Ellingson.
Yes. Greg Ellingson was in Edmonton for a while.
Kenny Stafford.
Yep.
And Shea Ross.
Yes, Shea Ross. It was interesting though because Ellingson was with the Eskimos for quite some time before coming to Winnipeg because it was one of those things where what happened was Kenny Lawler was in Winnipeg, and then at that point he had that phenomenal season. He won the Grey Cup, and he was like, "Now I'm getting my payday." Goes to Edmonton, gets the payday. Edmonton does not re-sign Ellingson as they review Kenny. They see Kenny Lawler as the replacement. Bombers sign Ellingson for a much cheaper contract than they got Lawler, just because the Bombers couldn't afford Lawler with everything else that the Bombers needed to keep. So, and then Ellingson, obviously, after the season, would decide to go to play in Montreal, where he's finally going to get to have his first game in this upcoming week. Now, that's kind of a bit how we got here with the Elk squad. So, moving forward, I mean, we're talking. Let's move forward and try to put it in more general terms, just because for those wondering what we think, I guess, about the Battle of Alberta coming up, we have a preview video out about that. Make sure you guys go check that out after you're finished watching this one. But long term, I think a few things that need to happen is Chris Jones has got to go, because as much as they got this win under Chris Jones, they also have how many losses under Chris Jones? Like, I don't give a... And you think the Trey Ford decision was his? I don't think so. They had... and then who was they had an offensive coordinator change earlier this season.
Yes, that was...
I believe the guy from the practice squad they brought up to the main roster.
Let me go pull operations staff. That was... So Jarius Jackson took over. Stephen McAdoo was their offensive coordinator beginning of the year.
Yes, because I remember one time you said it in a video, and I was like, that pronunciation can't be right. There's no fucking way. But yeah, so they had that change in the front of the office, and the thing is that like, so when is Chris Jones's contract over?
So if I'm not mistaken,
Is it end of this season or
I'm
next season?
pretty sure everyone on their coaching. I'm pretty sure everyone on the coaching staff has, because Victor, the guy who that just got let go of the CEO position, gave everyone 1 year deals. So I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure, along with all their previous staff that they still owe money to, which is why they can't fire anyone, that I believe their contracts are up at the end of the year. Here's
That's
my
the
other
thing with the
question.
CFL. It's like there's so much more. Their hands are tied a lot more when it comes to contracts and all that, in the sense of they don't have like the money to spend. Like for example, when the Toronto Maple Leafs fired Mike Babcock, they were paying him for like $6 million for like the next 5 years. But the thing is that the cash reserves in the Toronto Maple Leafs are fucking huge, so they can take that cost. CFL teams, not so much. Not so much. I think they need to invest in reserves, just because I mean the lack of a season in 2020 almost killed the league, which was kind of scary. So, but they gotta get that all fixed up and
So
moving forward.
here's my thought for you.
Yep.
Okay. So had Chris Jones not been pigheaded and started Trey Ford from the very beginning of the season,
Mm-hmm.
week 4, I say they beat Ottawa instead of Ottawa beating them 26-7. I say Edmonton would have beat.
Well,
Let me go back to
you
that
know
game
what
because
my
I'm not
argument would
sure.
also be. Let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say Ottawa still plays the same way they do. I think they beat Saskatchewan in that game where they lost by 1 point, in the sense of they may still blow a bit of a lead, but I think
Yes.
they establish a higher lead than they did in that game. So that even when they have the fuck up of forgetting the rules and taking a knee in the end zone, they still win in regulation.
So this is where I was going at is
If it even
had
goes that
they
long.
not had they have not started Jarrett Dougie
Yep.
in that game against Ottawa and started Trey Ford, and if Trey Ford beat Ottawa, okay, so now they're 2 points behind Saskatchewan
Yep.
for that third playoff spot. And now that means that they would be four, they would have 4 wins instead of two. And you could almost think like that riders would be a lot more scarce then than they are now.
Yeah, with the injury situation with the Riders, I think the Riders would be a lot more concerned, especially if like one of those wins, as I mentioned, was against Saskatchewan in that game where Saskatchewan narrowly squeaked out of it, as they had essentially played terrible for the first half of that game, and they were just
Mm-hmm.
clawing their way back into it. And obviously they won with that. But it's one of those things where if Edmonton had started with Trey Ford this season, they
Things wouldn't be as bad.
things would not be as bad as they are. However, I think if there's any hope in Edmonton, it's that at the end of the season, you get a fresh, clean slate for next year. And I think if you're Edmonton, you look to be like, okay, like, hey, we're that team that lost 22 in a row at home. That's not the team we got. If you look at, like, if you're Edmonton, you want to have the strongest second half possible. So that way, when free agency opens up, because free agency is massive in the CFL in the sense of everyone is signing 1 year deals. So free agency is like everything. If you don't add in free agency, nothing happens with your team. Calgary Stampeders. But it's because they did
So
nothing
so
this year in free
here
agency.
here's
Sorry.
here's the thing with, I don't mean to cut you off. Here's the thing with free agency is players are now trying to push for longer term
No, that's
contracts
true.
than signing 1 year deals. They're more of trying to push for like 2 year deals. So that
Yep, two or three for some of them, and that's true. But the thing is that in if you're a team like the Elks, you got to have at least a few guys locked up for 2 3 years. You know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where the Elks need to build an identity. You know, it's one of those things where if we look at the identity of the Bombers a few years ago, it was a defensive minded team. And they still have a great defense, but the Bombers now are looked at more of that offensive power that they can have with that excellent receiving core, with that good run game with Brady Oliveira. Teams with an identity can do well. I mean, when BC, their identity was that strong defense. The guys like Betts just getting sack after sack after sack. When your team has an identity, it gives you something to work off of, and it allows you to kind of achieve somewhere. The only identity that the Elks had for a while was, to put it bluntly, that they didn't win. And that's not a good identity. And so I think it's time that the Elks try to turn that around, as it is, if they can make that their identity as a team that suffered utter failure and is now looking to really turn the coin here and get going. That can be attractive for players if they show that they're willing to make the necessary changes and move forward. It's one of those things where they need to draw in talent. And one of the places that I think they should really look to steal from, ironically enough, is Ottawa. Because Ottawa, they seem to have an identity under Jeremiah Masoli, but Jeremiah Masoli, I think, is done. I think his career, sadly, is over. He's just gotten too many injuries, and it's just not working. He came back, didn't even last a half a game. And so it's one of those things where now, is Dustin Crum the identity of the Ottawa Redblacks? I don't think so. If you're the Edmonton Elks, if you can get a lot of those pieces that Ottawa has that are good, there are good pieces on Ottawa. Bring those guys in, make the defense a bit better, make the offense a bit better, and get your team up to mediocrity, then at that point you can really start to bring in more guys and be like, we're going for a push. And because you're in the middle of the pack and not just hanging around at the bottom of the standings, you can at least convince some guys that you're worth it. So I don't think next year is going to be like the big almighty Elks are at the top of the standings, but they have a chance to turn this around if they play their cards right.
So here's the thing that I was just looking at.
Yep.
Out of, because I just took a quick glimpse as to see who the top ranked players were for the upcoming CFL draft next year. Out of the top 8, one of them's a wide receiver. The rest are out offensive linemen, except for one big name that I say will be the Connor Bedard of the CFL next year, it will be Mr. Curtis Rorick, who will be the first ranked overall pick.
Well, you're assuming he ends up in the CFL. You're assuming that the NFL doesn't take him.
Okay, so let me throw a question out there for you.
Yep.
Okay, would you go start in the CFL, or would you go to the NFL and sit on a practice roster? Me personally, I would go to the CFL and start.
Yes, however, here's the thing. It's a very difficult decision because in the sense of if you go to the CFL, you have a chance of really impressing someone, possibly bringing up yourself a third string spot in the NFL. Thing is, if that year in the CFL isn't living up to the hype, you're stuck. And the thing is that the thing that makes the NFL so attractive, and which is why some guys have decided to skip out on the CFL and go straight to the NFL, is like the difference in pay between an NFL practice squad and the CFL, it's pretty big. It's pretty big. No, I totally get your point. I totally get it. But it's one of those things where it's really going to depend on a player-to-player basis.
I get the whole pay aspect. My whole thing is if I was Curtis and after I just seen what the Jacksonville Jaguars did to my brother and lying to him, I would have said, screw you guys. I'm going to go develop in the CFL first.
Curtis Jones.
Prove
Curtis is like flipping off Tony Khan right now.
Prove my point in the CFL, make a name for myself, and then go over.
I get that. Stir the pot. You know, if you're Curtis Rourke, you know what you do? You call BC and you'd be like, so you guys interested in that first overall pick? Huh? Like, just try to bait them. You know what I mean? Because you're thinking
Yeah.
like fucking make that money, and then you know what you do? You wear the same number as your brother. So that way you go to the fans. Nobody needs new jerseys. I got you guys. Like you're the savior.
That's the funny thing looking at the standings, because if you think about it, okay, Edmonton is last with 4. Then there's Calgary.
Do they have their pick?
Let me just double check that.
The reason why I want to make sure is because there was a year with the Bombers, like of the past 2 where we won the Grey Cup and then got like the 3rd overall pick because of a trade. Which is kind of because it's a lot more likely to happen in the CFL than it is in any other league.
Everyone in the first round has their draft picks.
Okay.
So here's my theory, okay? Edmonton's first right now, just saying first, like as in last, with 4 points. Then it's Calgary and Ottawa with 6. Saskatchewan with 10. Or sorry, I skipped Hamilton. Hamilton has 8. Saskatchewan 10. Montreal 12. BC 14. Toronto 16. Winnipeg 18. The second you win one game, it does that whole flip over where it's like anything could change within like one game.
Yeah. I don't thing is that if the Elks have 2 really good games against Calgary, they have the possibility of possibly flipping the Red Blacks on their head, because I believe they play the Stamps twice.
They play the Stamps twice.
Yeah, because they do the same thing for Battle of Alberta as they do the Labor Day and Banjo Bowl.
I'm trying to find out if... No, they do not. They don't play Calgary anymore. So if Edmonton wins the next 2, then they take the season series.
Yep. So, like, I'm just trying to think, like, all in all, if we're looking at the Elks, they gotta try to pull some guys in, and they gotta get rid of Chris Jones. So maybe a fresh coaching staff wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It would.
I mean, I want to say if you don't make the playoffs, your coaching staff across the league's getting a facelift. The interesting point that I just noticed is, okay, if, for example, Edmonton takes the season series the next 2 games against Calgary, their next game after that on week 15, September 15th, is in Saskatchewan. Imagine if Saskatchewan loses their next 2 games against you guys, home and home. Edmonton wins their next 2 games. Then Edmonton beats Saskatchewan by more than 1 point. Now Edmonton, by goal differential, point differential, now has that 3rd playoff spot over Saskatchewan.
That's a big if. You're assuming
that's what I'm saying.
Although I will
that's what I'm saying.
Although I will say the most unlikely thing out of that is that
Edmonton sweeps Calgary twice.
Yeah. Is that they beat Calgary twice in Edmonton and in Calgary. So we'll have to see.
The interest that I know that we're dealing with the Elks in this video, but the interesting thing that I seen today is that Mayer is leading the league in passing yards.
I know. He's also leading the league in interceptions.
That too.
Which is why you should not judge a book by its cover. Just because the reason he's leading the league in passing yards is because they don't fucking run the ball. Although that might change. Isn't Kadeem Carey possibly back in? From what you sent me the other day?
Let me go back and look at the injury
reports. Well, it doesn't matter. You don't have to check. This is an Elks video. But I guess, is there anything else that we need to cover on the basis of the Edmonton Elks?
Purefoy is now off the 6th game. So he will be back. And Elliott Brown came off the 6th game. So either they're both going to play Monday in the second half of the doubleheader on TSN, or they're going to be on the 1-game IR list. So it all depends. But that's as That's all I have.
That's all you got? I think I got
That's
what
all.
I got. And we went 25 minutes talking about this. We got a lot in here. So I hope you guys stuck around for all of it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know some of you really love the longer format of videos. So here you go. But
Just
yeah.
give me 1 second. I just want to just double check because oh no, you know what? I sent it to you the other day. I just
Rick,
want to
I'm doing
quickly
my
pull
fucking
this.
outro right now.
I know. I just want to pull this up. Okay. So the season series is tied 30-30 between Calgary 1949
Not
to
the
now. So
you're not talking. You mean the
the
franchise
Labor
series?
Day series. No, the Labor Day series between the two of them is 30-30-1. So this is going to be the tiebreaker come Monday. That's all I wanted to say.
There you go. Win one just to
And
lose it next year.
Edmonton has only won once since 2012
So this is a big
on Labor
game.
Day.
This is a big game then for the Elks, especially if the Elks are gonna sweep the Stamps, then beat the Riders, and Riders lose all 3 games. Like, let's see where it goes, guys. But make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe if you have not already. If you guys are more of a Spotify listener, make sure you guys go check that out on there. If you're listening to this on Spotify, hi, my name's Carter. This is Rick. You can't see us because you're watching on Spotify, but we're smiling right now. Despite the fact, I don't know, Rick doesn't know if his team's going to, I don't know if my team's going to win tomorrow, but we're both hopefuls.
Listen, one last thing that I will say, very, very last thing. Saskatchewan owns you guys on Labor Day 37-20. That's all I got to say.
When?
Mic drop. On Labor Days.
Yeah, like all time?
All time.
Yeah, and they got 4 Grey Cups. So you know what? We won 2 in 2 years, and you won 4 in like 100. I don't want to hear it. No. One thing, I don't want to hear it.
One last thing that I will say to all Rider fans, even though this is an Elks video, if you see Carter in Saskatchewan and Bombers lose, go give him hell for me, please.
I swear to God, like, if somebody hands me a fucking watermelon if my team loses, I'm gonna lose my mind. Gonna do like one of those videos of like people throwing the watermelon like from like the top of like a building and watching it splat on the ground. That's what's gonna happen. Mosaic Stadium. I'll be there. So yeah, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. As I said like 2 times, but Rick keeps interrupting my outro. And we will see you guys next time.